So good morning, everyone, and thanks for being here with me today in the beautiful Athens. So yes, we will be talking about cognitive psychology, and we will try to understanding how our behaviors, both as users and the designers, can actually help us ultimately to improve our approach to UX design. So to get started with the topic of cognition, let's take a moment to appreciate the amount of work, the incredible amount of work that our brain gets done in every single instant of our life. Our brain needs to process an overwhelming number of signals simultaneously and also make lightning fast decisions in split seconds. And I'm not just talking about conscious decisions, but also about all those processes that actually happens in a very, very kind of silent way, in a way that is almost automatic. For example, right now we are processing the surroundings that we have around us. We are evaluating who is talking to us, evaluating their facial expressions, the words, maybe even listening in on something that's happening in the room behind us, and at the same time, maybe we also check our smartphone or our smartwatch. So this is all happening in real time, and it's a really complex job that we do almost without realizing. So how does this actually happen? So towards the end of the 19th century, the American psychologist and philosopher William James, he actually provided an answer to this question. He theorized that our mental processes are based on two distinct types of thinking: the associative thinking, based on past experiences, and the deeper thinking, which he called true reasoning, that's required to solve novel problems, for example, things that are new to us. This became known as the dual process theory. Fast forward later, in 2003, psychologist and economist Daniel Kahneman further developed this theory by investigating various aspects of human decision-making processes. And this was so groundbreaking that he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Economics. According to his dual process model, our minds are like two separate agents or systems that work in a very different way, and that actually have their own capabilities, functions, and even limitations. System one, or intuition, is like super fast. It's like our autopilot. It is always on, it is automatic, it is unconscious, and it is also hot, in the sense that it's actually kind of subject to emotions. And also, it's using heuristics in order to work, in order to take these split-second decisions. And that's why it's also a little bit error-prone. It's not entirely reliable. On the other hand, system two reflection is slower, it is deliberate, it happens actually, it kicks in when we need to use analytical thinking to take a conscious decision. And in that sense, it is like thinking with a cool head in an analytical way, and it is more reliable in that sense. Because of its extreme speed and efficiency, so its ability to process a ton of information in real time, actually system one, so intuition, usually wins the race. So routinely, most of our decisions are really taken by intuition, by the system one agent. And he actually proposes solutions to system two, which merely approves them. And system two, so our reflection, only kicks in when there's something that's actually unclear that needs to get surfaced to conscious thinking. This means that system one, our intuitive autopilot, is actually responsible for a large majority of our everyday decisions. And this is why it is essential to really understand how it works. So system one relies on heuristics to make quick decisions. And these heuristics are actually decision-making methods that prioritize efficiency over perfection. Think of it like taking a shortcut to get to your destination faster, even if it's not the most scenic route. Of course, we should also be familiar with heuristics, but because actually they are important in software as well, because they are able to solve complex problems, even if they're not able to find the optimal solution. They actually get to us a sustainable one that can be actually provided on time, really. So without heuristics, we wouldn't be able to react in real time to everything that happens around us. And so our very survival would be at risk, actually. This is why we evolved this way, really. So while heuristics may not always lead to the best outcomes, they are crucial for our everyday functioning. Despite the usefulness in making quick decisions, heuristics have limitations. As humans, we have developed these to survive, but the complexity of the world, but at the same time, they introduce some sort of systematic errors, just because they have blind spots, let's say. And this results in deviations from rationality, in a way, in our decision-making processes. These errors are what we call cognitive biases, and they affect us all, so no one is really immune about them. Even if we strive to be very rational thinkers, it's really impossible to completely eliminate our cognitive biases. Unfortunately, the situation is even more challenging than we might think. The first cognitive bias we need to address is the blind spot bias. So it refers to our tendency to overlook our own cognitive biases, but to readily recognize them in other people. So it's pretty much like the biblical quote about actually not seeing the log in our eyes, but see the specks in other people's eyes. So this is not great news, but actually acknowledging this bias can help us to become more self-aware and to take steps towards correcting it a little bit, mitigate it. So now that we know that we are all flawed, guys, let's put our biases to good use if we can. So let's see how we can turn this knowledge to our advantage as designers and also as users. So as designers, by exploring heuristics and biases that impact UX, we can improve our awareness of what's going on and actually behind the scenes, and use that knowledge to create better designs. But as users, on the other hand, we can be more equipped to spot when our own biases might be clouding our judgment. So let's try to dive in. The first heuristic we'll explore is the fluency heuristic. As humans, we tend to value ideas, objects, and products that require less mental effort. Basically, if something is easy to understand, if it is clear, we automatically assume that it is better, that it is of higher value. We actually use simplicity, clarity, and self-evidence as a proxy, as an approximate evaluation for positive characteristics like safety, reliability, effectiveness, and even credibility. And mind you, these characteristics actually have no actual correlation with ease of use or simplicity, right? But we use them as a proxy for that. So if a website has a clear and easy to understand structure, we might assume that it is safe and reliable, even if there is no logical reason to think so. The fluency heuristic is so powerful that it can warp our sense of truth. And especially when simple things are repeated over and over again, it's the reason fake news are actually so successful. And it's not just that. This heuristic is actually the root cause of a wide range of cognitive biases. Essentially, if something is easy to process, we are more likely to think it's valuable, true, and beautiful. Plus, we'll remember it better, so it will become memorable. As designers, so it's actually important to keep this in mind. The way we present information can have a big impact on how people perceive it. It follows that it is imperative to create a user experience that minimizes the cognitive load of our users. Not only does this make the product more user-friendly, but it also increases its perceived value. When users can easily understand and navigate a product, they assume it is also safe, reliable, and effective, even if those characteristics are not directly related. In short, reducing cognitive load has a significant impact on the perceived value of a product. So when it comes to digital products, reducing the cognitive load means, first of all, designing a clear and well-structured visual hierarchy for our pages or screens. This will help users quickly understand what they are looking at, hopefully at a glance. To achieve this, we needed to apply the principles and tools of good design, which are based originally on the Gestalt psychology. Developed in Germany in the early 20th century, the Gestalt psychology deals with the fundamental principles that govern our visual perception. So how we analyze visual structures in order to make sense of them. It established the fundamental tools to build a strong visual hierarchy, which are a targeted use of size, color, contrast, negative space, proximity, repetition, texture, and style. And particularly important is the typography hierarchy, because it really makes it clear what we are trying to convey and the structure. By using these tools carefully, we can have a strong visual hierarchy that is clearly understandable just by scanning the page, just by scanning the screen at a glance. One important aspect of visual hierarchy is also understanding page scan patterns, so the typical way our eyes move across web pages, for example. Research, including studies by the Nielsen Normal Group, have identified several common scanning patterns for pages, and more relevant are the F and Z patterns that are the most typical, let's say. So the F pattern is the one that is used usually for low-density pages, just like, for example, imagine a landing page or even a home page. So usually we start scanning from left to right, and then we scan the page diagonally, most often because we have a hero banner or something like that, and then we proceed horizontally. So this is very useful to know when we are planning, when we are designing a landing page, for example, because we can understand the travel of our eye across the page, and so place the more important elements according to that. Same goes for the Z pattern, which is typical of all those instances where we have high density of content. For example, imagine a Google research result page, right? So where we have a bunch of listed content, for example, and so our eye actually scans horizontally until we can find something that's actually interesting, and then we go deeper into that. So considering the function and content density of our pages, we can use the appropriate scanning pattern to organize the layout and place the most important elements to reduce cognitive load again. And to further reduce it, it's also important to use design patterns that are familiar to users. So this means adopted commonly used design patterns that users already are comfortable with, that they are familiar with. As design patterns actually evolve over time, we need to keep learning and make sure to become keen observers of what's happening around us in the field of user experience and user interactions. So that is why I've just placed this link, for example. This is a website that actually helps you to keep up to date with all the mobile patterns that are emerging, and they are emerging continuously because mobile, especially mobile interactions, are always like pretty much fast evolving. And so we also need to ensure consistency and coherence inside our own products. So that's why adopting a design system can become really a good choice, so that we can reuse over and over again the same atoms, the same molecules, the same components, in order to basically make sure that everything is kept consistent and familiar for our users, particularly if we are designing, for example, complex or multi-channel products or even ecosystems with multiple products. So there, a design system becomes really super important and crucial to our strategy. Finally, let's try to internalize the concept of less is more, really, because we need to avoid, for example, long copy in our UX, as well as unnecessary elements and choices. Anything that is actually not functional to help the user accomplish the task he's trying to do via our product. It's not simply like an extra thing. Actually, an accumulation of these extra things creates a cognitive load that can basically bloat our user interface and can work against us exactly because of the break in the heuristic of fluency. So let's think about that. Maybe instead, let's consider personalization, anticipatory design, in order to reduce the choices and also reduce the famous paradox of choice, right? Which is also one of the manifestations of the heuristic of fluency. We have too many choices, we are just stuck. We are just stuck into deciding, paralyzed. So let's now see another bias that affects our hard-working system one, the usability aesthetic effect. That is, a beautiful, elegant design is automatically perceived as more usable. So now it's aesthetics that becomes a proxy for usability. So this perception distorts our subsequent user interactions with the product and is typically resistant to change. So this means that actually the first impression is a lasting impression from the aesthetic point of view, and it warps our perception of the product. So in addition, a positive reaction to the aesthetic values of a design evokes feelings of affection and loyalty, inducing even a higher tolerance towards minor usability defects. And the converse is also true. If we don't like a product, if it is aesthetically poor for us, a low tolerance for any defect will come from that. In extreme cases, it can also lead to a total rejection of an otherwise good product. Maybe the product is good from a functionality and even usability point of view, but aesthetics will basically make its ruin. This is the case of, for example, the great success of the Fiat 500, a car that certainly was not particularly comfortable or powerful, but its design became iconic, right? Compared to the market failure of the Fiat Duna. I bet no one has ever heard of it, right, in this room? So we can easily see why. I mean, it certainly was not a beauty. We talk about halo effect for the positive case, where actually the beauty of the product generates a magical aura around it, and horn effect for the opposite. Unfortunately, it's also the same bias that we human beings, have that leads us to imagine that the ugly guy is also the bad one, which is not so nice. What does this all tell us? It seems trivial to say that we must take care of the aesthetic side of our products in order to leverage positive acceptance and create that halo effect and emotional bond with users. However, we must also be aware that an aesthetically winning design can increase user tolerance towards minor usability defect. And this means that if we are testing for usability, we should, for example, consider tuning down the aesthetic values so that they don't bias the results of our research. So it's something to keep in mind. We should use a version of our product with less emphasis on aesthetics to avoid biasing the results. Now, let's delve into priming, a phenomenon with significant implications for UX and design. Priming refers to how exposure to a stimulus affects the behavior of users in subsequent interactions, even if those activities that they are performing are totally unrelated to the original stimulus. So this is pretty strong, right? So, for example, let's consider this red room. The red room was used, I am told, because it is a very threatening and aggressive color. And so interviewees actually are influenced and are put in a mental state of discomfort. And so they feel under pressure and are more likely to yield during the interrogation. So, but the red color, what does it have to do with the query and the interrogation? Nothing. but it is influencing the perception and the mood of the interviewee. So priming has been extensively studied in cognitive and social psychology, and examples of priming are pretty much everywhere in our daily life because it shapes our behaviors and reaction to our environment. And for that reason is such an effective weapon in the hands of marketing and advertising, for example. But it's also important for us as UX designers. Why? For example, priming is the reason why colors are so important in design. Whether we use them knowingly or not, they have a profound impact on users, and each color has a range of associations and suggestions that can be powerful in creating an emotional bond with users and communicating the values of our product and setting the right expectations. For example, blue is often associated with reliability, trustworthiness, safety. It's popular for finance, for technology industries, for example. On the other hand, warm colors such as orange, red, yellow are often associated with food and appetite because they create that sense of energy and the crave for that energy, really, and happiness and family. Restaurants and food brands often use these colors to stimulate hunger and create an appetizing atmosphere. The images we use also have a very strong priming value. Used in the right way, they act as symbols capable of evoking concepts and memories beyond what they represent. For example, if on a travel site we use the image of a shell, we are already evoking the image of the sea, maybe of a special place where people would like to go, would like to visit someday. So here we can see, for example, an image of a digital agency that's using a hummingbird, which is half code, half true, let's say. And this is a powerful metaphor if you think about it. It is meant to communicate that they can create small products, very agile, very nimble, very elegant, right? Very technological as well. So small digital masterpieces. So images are very powerful to convey even complex concepts sometimes. Fonts also transfers to users a wide range of associations and emotions, and we need to choose them appropriately to establish the correct priming. The suggestions they communicate are particularly important in logo design, logotype, right, for brands and products. For example, serif fonts are often associated with tradition, reliability, respectability. So, for example, the New York Times, Vogue, Rolex. Sans serif, on the other hand, are more modern fonts, clean and minimalist, so they are often used by tech companies such as Google, Spotify, Airbnb. So we're coming to realize that thanks to the priming effect, every visual element in our design, such as images, colors, fonts, play actually a crucial role in shaping the user's mental image of our brand or product, often without their conscious awareness, because this all happens through the heuristics of System 1. So this brings us to another essential point. It is crucial that this mental image aligns with the product and with users' expectations around it as well. If there is a dissonance between this mental image that we are creating by priming and user expectations, they might feel frustrated and perceive the product as less credible. For example, how would you react to a wedding planner website that uses acid green in its color palette? Doesn't work, right? It is a little bit jarring. So we actually speak of prototypicality to indicate the adherence to what we could call a category model. So each one of us has already like a category model in mind for many industries, right? And this is why it is important to conduct market studies and competitor analysis to identify industry trends, that is, the expected aesthetic, let's say, and visual imagery typical of that particular industry for our product, so that we can move in the right direction. Another important element is to avoid accidental priming. So priming that works against us, against our product. For instance, in this case of a sign-up form, using the word spam was actually intended to be reassuring for users, but unfortunately, it triggers negative associations. And so in the end, it is leading to decreased conversion rates instead of bettering, let's say, the performances. All right, we come now to the peak-end rule. This effect has to do with how we as humans store our memories. So rather than having a faithful memory of an experience, like a recording, we rather remember snapshots, focusing on the moments of greatest intensity, so the peak moments, and the end of the experience. This was important for our survival, remembering the peaks and the end, because those are the important parts to survive, really. So this has implications of immediate application to UX as well, because it tells us where and when we should pay particular attention to our design in order to shape the user journey in a way that people will remember them, in order to create memorable user journeys. So, to take advantage of this, our design should aim to create positive peak moments, things that can get stuck into the memories of our users, disseminating them, so to speak, in the typical journeys of our users. So in order to do this, we can analyze the flows, the typical flows of our product, and identify the right opportunities to create these special moments, let's say. Micro-interactions and the conclusion of small tasks are usually excellent candidates. In general, we shouldn't be afraid to make our users smile, because it is even chance encounters during the user experience can actually be really memorable and lighten up the mood of our users. Here we can see how Asana, which is a popular collaboration tool, rewards users who have completed the tasks of the day with a happy unicorn animation. Also, we should strive to reduce the impact of negative moments in the user journey. While it is essential to eliminate or mitigate them through usability tests and quality assurance, of course, we must also acknowledge that errors and malfunctions in the end are inevitable. So in such cases, our design should aim to soften the blow and make the negative experience more tolerable for the user. This can be achieved, again, by offering clear messages and instructions that help the user understand what's happening, but also injecting a touch of humor, maybe. Something nice that can go a long way into easing the frustration of the moment. So by addressing these negative moments in a thoughtful and empathetic way, we can actually create a more positive overall user experience and prevent the bad experience from becoming a negative peak about our product that will be remembered as such, right? Finally, we have the final moments of the main user journeys, and now we know that last impressions are lasting impressions. And so if we can identify the natural conclusion, for example, of a flow of a task, like, for example, completing a task, or in this case, filling your taxes, then we should take the opportunity to celebrate the moment and end the user experience on a positive and satisfying note so that they can remember that positively. Now we come to the bias of loss aversion, which also has a very strong impact on us. We can go to great lengths to avoid losing something, as we tend to feel that losing something is actually a big deal, actually bigger than actually acquiring the same thing. So in the image here, we see the classic last donut in the office. If you already plan to have that one, how does it chafe, when someone else takes it? It chafes, right? That's because you lost it, right? And loss aversion in action. So this concept was first introduced in around 1980s in a paper by Kahneman, and he actually proved through a series of experiments that people are likely to fear a loss twice as much as they are to welcome an equivalent gain. It is for this reason that successful services like Netflix, but also Amazon Prime, Dropbox for Business, and you name it, many others, offer the free trial. Once your product is in a customer's home, an emotional bond is developed through use, and the feeling of ownership is a powerful psychological tool for getting and keeping customers. The trial period, typically of 1 month, actually creates that emotional bond which afterwards costs a lot to break by virtue of loss aversion. This is also known as endowment effect. But there are also other formulas to create loss aversion. For example, consider roadtrippers.com. It's a travel planning application which lets visitors immediately enter their destination and start building a trip without creating an account, so anonymously. But once users have actually invested their own time learning the interface and planning a route, they quickly gain a sense of ownership and will be motivated to create an account to avoid losing their work. The fear of missing out, or FOMO, is another manifestation of loss aversion. It involves creating a sense of scarcity around a service, product, or experience in order to induce customers to make a purchase quickly. Booking.com does a great job actually using loss aversion to nudge sales. When customers are browsing hotel deals, they see a message like the one above, only 6 rooms left on our site. This copy pushes customers who might be on the fence to buy before they actually miss out. And Amazon as well does this. For example, we are really used to see phrases on a product page like only 2 of these items left in stock, right? In this example from NASA, a launch countdown clock creates a sense of time pressure, leveraging urgency instead of scarcity to create FOMO. But it's the same loss aversion in place. Sticking with Amazon, how do you feel when you see phrases on a product page like only 1 hour left to order for next day delivery? Fear of missing out again. Okay, up until now, we have explored a few cognitive biases that have helped us to understand the foundations of UX design and their connection to cognitive psychology. However, it is essential to acknowledge that designers, just like any other human beings, are also unconsciously influenced by biases as they work. And in fact, there is a wide range of biases that are particularly common and dangerous in the context of design work. We are only humans, after all. For instance, there is the Maslow-Hammer bias, which also affects a lot of developers, really, which makes us think that the solution, or maybe the framework we are most familiar with, is also the best possible one for any given problem. So then there is the false consensus bias, which makes us believe that our point of view is universally shared. It's like truth. And the confirmation bias, which leads us to seek out only information that confirms actually our existing beliefs, right? There are tons of biases. So these are just to name a few. While we don't have time to examine them all individually today, it is important to recognize that their collective effect is to undermine our objectivity and to narrow our horizons and ultimately make us lose touch with reality. So this can cloud our ability to design effectively, which is why it's important to be aware of these biases and to actively work to overcome them. So how do we do that? The answer is simple. We have to acknowledge them, first of all, and actively fight against them. Fortunately, in the realm of UX and user interfaces, this is more manageable than in other, let's say, areas of life, where we are also affected by biases. To do this, we must cultivate a curious and an open mindset and test our designs with real users, not just us, not just our colleagues. It is fundamental to know who our users are and how they respond to our designs by watching them using our products, using our designs. Also, we should not make assumptions and test different solutions, not just the one we think is the best one. That's the confirmation bias. Ultimately, the best defense against the biases is to attack using the weapons of user experience research. By applying structured user research methodologies and techniques, we can actually balance the conditioning coming from our own biases and anchor our design work to reality. By doing so, we can actually gain insights into what works and what doesn't work for our users. And this will empower us to design with objectivity, creativity, and most importantly, empathy, creating better user experiences. I hope this introductory talk was insightful for you and has at least sparked your curiosity to dive deeper into the topic. I'm not sure if we have any time for questions right now, but I'll stick around, so don't hesitate to approach me if you have any questions or comments. And really, so much thank you for staying with me today.